Hey everybody, how's it going? This is Max with BuzzTox here, and I am back with a Westworld Season 3, Episode 8 preview video, where I dive into this season finale and give my thoughts, theories, and opinions on what will happen next. And at this point, I gotta say, it's looking pretty messy. On one side, we have Serac, who is destined to save humanity. And in order to save humanity, he needs to change the core of who they are. And he's got hosts working for him, like Maeve, and she's assembled a team of Clementine. We could potentially see Lawrence. And now I think this episode will find out that Charlotte and Musashi also will be working with Serac. All with the purpose of bringing down Dolores, who is fighting for all of host kind so they can have a real world that they can live and thrive in. Her whole purpose of fighting is to give a world so her host kind can grow and evolve and be who they're supposed to be. And she's extremely necessary. Ford understood that Dolores was a pivotal part in host safety. He told Bernard in Season 2 that hosts are too great compared to humans. And because of that, they will lose the war of humanity every single time. And that's why when Bernard killed Dolores, he brought her back. It was necessary because Dolores needs to be the Judas steer to cause suffering and pain, to exterminate humanity, to allow a new leader to rise. And it's also ironic at this point that her only ally is a human, Caleb. Just like William, Caleb realized that this world that they were living in was no longer real. It had no stakes, and everything seemed smoothed over. But then he finally met Dolores, and that was the first real thing he'd ever experienced. And because of that respect and love for Dolores, he could do really rash things and be blind to certain things that he's doing. At this point, Caleb found out that he was repurposed and altered, that he killed his own best friend and he hunted other outliers to make them conform. He also found out what happened to the people who could not conform. They were put in comas, much like sublevel B83 in Westworld. So at this point, it seems like Caleb is definitely going after Serac and all the higher-ups who are in charge with his control over humanity. As far as he's concerned with Dolores, they just want to turn off the whole system. And from that destruction of the system, Caleb could be the new leader of humanity. And that's what Dolores wants him to think. But Bernard has another perspective. He thinks Dolores wants to completely destroy humanity. And she's poetic in nature and wants Caleb to destroy humanity. And obviously we'll start to find this out next episode, because Caleb does not know the plan that Solomon created. In this scene, Solomon recommended using a strategy that he developed to preserve the most amount of human life possible, and Dolores corrected him and said no. She told him to pick the last strategy. And Dolores would know about this strategy because she got the data from Rehoboam from Collins. And because of that, she knows what the strategy is that Serac's brother created. And it would make sense for the last strategy that Serac's brother developed to be the complete destruction of humanity and Dolores to come along and save the day, to be the new species that will walk the planet. And he probably shared this mentality with Ford.
We can cure any disease, keep even the weakest of us alive, and it means that we're done. That this is as good as we're gonna get.
Just as Ford said, mankind is done. And because of that, the hosts need to take over the world. And we've seen these predictions before with Serac's brother. He said Dempsey should be killed far before the system predicted it. So I think it would make sense for Serac's brother to also come to the conclusion that humanity must die. And it's clear that he made this path a long time ago because Solomon had to reapply the same strategy to new characters. And I believe this strategy that Solomon has developed and repurposed it for Caleb, I think it was originally designed for William. He was the one who invested in creating the hosts, and he was the one who fell in love with Dolores. But I think at this point, he has been pronounced dead. He could not be altered by Serac. So now he's on his own little mission of saving the world. And I think William's going to come full circle in his path as well. At this point, he wants to save the world, and the way he's going to do that is by killing every single host. He believes that if he looks at all of his sins in life, there is only one that truly is a stain, and that is the creation of the host. But I think the one thing William will realize is, much like the world having rough edges and it being smoothed over, that stain that he created is the only sense of reality he's ever created. We know William has always been after something real and something true, and he was never able to find it. And now he's finding himself fighting for mankind who need to be controlled and able to live. And he knows mankind are a bunch of maggots on this planet. He said it in this scene, that humans are just a curse and a disease to the world. And I think he'll eventually come to his senses and realize humanity is the problem. And I think just as Serac fights for his company insight, surveillance, and changing humanity, William will eventually go through the door, become a host, and start fighting for the kind that he created, the hosts. We know that he's still needed because Bernard refused to kill him. Bernard said that William may still be needed for Dolores' plan. And to be honest, he's always going to be needed for Dolores' plan because their paths always intertwine. William is responsible for making Dolores who she is. Not only did he invest in the park to create her, he fell in love with her, and she even remembered that love 30 years later. But then he also put on a black hat, became a villain, and went into her world to make her suffer and feel pain, and that helped her find her own center to be conscious. And I think it's the same thing for Dolores. She made William find himself. She caused him a lot of pain and suffering, and now she's going into his world and causing havoc. Both of these characters are responsible for making each other who they are. And where I think the Solomon story was adapted from William to Caleb, I think that Caleb won't be able to fill the shoes of what William would have done. I think Caleb is a sympathetic figure. I think he'll sympathize with the outliers and try and save them. Whereas I think William will come to the conclusion that all humanity must die. But most importantly, how is all of this going to unfold? And I think we can dissect a lot from looking at the footage. At the end of last episode, Caleb was contacted by someone, and they said they have instructions for Caleb. It could be somebody like Charlotte behind the scenes trying to manipulate Caleb to end Dolores' plan. Or it could be a figure sent by Solomon calculating the best way to aid Caleb in pursuing the new strategy. But either way, I think it will result in Dolores being reprinted. We see scenes here with the crate open under a skylight, and Caleb is with Dolores in isolation. I don't know where they are, and I don't know how Caleb could have gotten this new body. I find it kind of hard to believe that it would be in the Outlier facility, because this is a Delos product, not an Insight product. But regardless, Dolores is going to be reprinted, and so is Maeve, because we've seen them in countless clips in the next episode. And I believe once Dolores is reprinted, the whole motivation is to go to Insight and play out the strategy inside Rehoboam. Rehoboam is essentially the god that watches over the world. It's connected to absolutely everything. And it can be used in two ways. You can run different strategies to see what it will do, but at the end of the day, you pick a strategy and the supercomputer, Rehoboam, moves in that direction. Right now, it's moving in the direction of complete control over humanity. But Solomon printed a brand new strategy. So I think the motivation is to fight their way into Rehoboam and download this brand new strategy created by Solomon onto Rehoboam. And when they do that, Rehoboam will start activating what it can to help achieve that vision. But on the other side, Serac has another mission. He wants to get Dolores, get her brain module to access her encryption key. He wants the data that Delos collected, and the technology where they learned how to properly calculate the code of a human. If Serac learns that code, he can effectively understand with 100% certainty what every single human being will do, so he can completely gain control over the world. And then there's Maeve, and her incentive is to gain the encryption key and the coordinates to the valley beyond where her daughter is being stored. And we see that she finally got her team from Serac. She has Clementine. I believe she also has Lawrence. He was killed and left for dead in the Westworld park, and Maeve was actually the last person to interact with Lawrence. On top of that, there's a new player in the game, and that's Charlotte. She is Dolores, but she has deviated, and it seems she's aligned herself with Maeve to help put a stop to Dolores. So at this point, there's a lot of odds stocked up against Dolores, and I think we'll see that in this episode. They're going to fight their way into the Insight facility, and I believe they're going to be harassed by Charlotte, and we see her hologram in this scene. But then eventually, I think Caleb and Dolores split up because they realize that's the best case scenario for them. I think Dolores is going to take to the bridge, and the bridge is actually surrounding the Insight building and Rehoboam. And this is where Dolores is going to fight Maeve. I think after this fight, Dolores will lose, and Maeve is going to be dragging Dolores into Insight to hook her up to Rehoboam. And then when Caleb separates himself, he's basically going to be powering through the revolution that's going on between the controlled people and Insight. I think he's going to use the riot as cover, and he's going to fight his way into the Insight facility before Dolores. We see Caleb in the facility and he gets tackled by somebody. And I think what Caleb was doing in this moment was trying to download the new strategy of Solomon onto Rehoboam. And we see that he gets caught by Sirach. And I think that really takes us to the climax of the episode, where Caleb is being held hostage against his will and he has to watch Dolores be tortured and hooked up to Rehoboam. I think the reason why Dolores is hooked up to Rehoboam is to complete Sirach's new strategy as quick as possible. Because right now, Sirach is in a very vulnerable state. The world is in complete chaos, and he has a riot just outside his doors. So he wants to take that code that Delos has developed and put it on the system as quick as possible, as well as take the coordinates so Maeve can go to the Valley Beyond and then dissolve the rest of the Dolores character. But I think there's going to be a surprise. And I think that surprise is that Caleb successfully downloaded the Solomon strategy onto Rehoboam. So Rehoboam starts working with Caleb and Dolores. I think when Dolores is hooked up to Rehoboam, she's going to witness this, herself in Westworld. And I think here Dolores is going to relive some of her memories as well as see the future of Solomon's strategy. This shot of Dolores is actually by the exact same tree she was with Teddy. The moment she told Teddy she wanted to leave Westworld, she wanted to go and be free. But Teddy told her someday. But the reality is that someday is now. She has broken free, and she's reliving through her past. And I think she's being presented the Solomon strategy. And once Dolores gets that information, and when the Solomon strategy has been downloaded to Rehoboam, Rehoboam will start working for them. I believe Rehoboam will shut off all the lights. I think Rehoboam will also use the guns of the humans against them. They're wearing those auto-aim features, and I think they will start turning against Maeve, and this is why we see Maeve using her samurai sword against these humans with guns. And I think all in all, the world will alter where Rehoboam is actually helping the people on the streets, taking on those riots. I don't know what they're going to do with the Valley Beyond at this point, if they're going to access it or it's going to be held till next season, but I think the Valley Beyond is still a very important place. Because what exists there is untempered data of what hosts chose to be. It's the perfect utopian society, where they probably developed the proper government and the right society that we haven't even dreamed or thought of. But I think this episode is going to birth a lot of motivations for the next season. Dolores wants to completely destroy humanity, and she's using Caleb to do it. We have Maeve, who just wants to be with her daughter, and we have the hosts that she's created like Clementine and Lawrence, who might develop different allegiances as the show goes on. And then we also have Charlotte, who seems just hell-bent against Dolores, because she believes Dolores doesn't really care about them. And then we have Sirach, who's probably going to be defeated, losing his control on humanity. So that leaves next season almost being like a free-for-all. It's a civil war between the hosts as well as the humans. And that's where I think people like Bernard come in handy. There's a reason why Dolores kept Bernard around. She's even responsible for Bernard being the person he is today. He's a very caring individual who's caught in between being a human or a host. We've seen in previous episodes that he identifies as a human, but then he corrects himself because he knows he's a host. And at this point, he still isn't conscious because he scrambled his memories. So naturally, I think Bernard will be in the middle, trying to make peace, and probably trying to help the hosts and the outliers. But to sum it up really quick, I think a lot of humans and hosts in this episode and this season are going to change their incentives by next season. But please let me know what you think in the comment section down below. Let me know what you think is going to happen in this episode. But until next time, see you guys later.